Antonio Conte is off to Juventus, but to be fair, if I had to play Arsenal next, I'd want to leave the country too. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, the Black Man, Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right. Antonio Conte, could he be off to Juventus? They need a manager. He doesn't like to stick around in any one place, and we know he doesn't want to be at Tottenham. He made that clear after he arrived. I guess he's doing okay there, but given the opportunity to leave right before having to play the mighty Arsenal, you could understand if he decided now was the time to take off, and take off he may. I want to just start with a little bit of admin. You know what? I'm not going to start with admin. Let me do this. Let me introduce Tim. He's on Twitter at Sturberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
I caught you there because I suggested I was going to do the admin, and then I wound up not doing the admin. But anyway, what I do want to say is a lot of you voted for us in the Football Content Award preliminary round. And so thank you for doing that. Like it is pretty wild because there are obviously a lot bigger podcasts than ours, but we are a mighty crew and a mighty community, and we do come together. We've come together for the Arsenal Foundation, which we will be doing again, by the way, this season. Have a call next week to sort of start putting those gears in motion. But now it is the final round of the Football Content Awards. I have been reliably told that Arsblog, the Arscast, is on for bigger stuff, admittedly, is fair. So we would be thrilled and humbled if you would vote for us. We'll put out some tweets on how to do that, but basically you can look up the Football Content Awards, their website. You can just vote for one category or all the categories if you want. There's friends and people you'll recognize running in other categories. We are up against a Tottenham podcast, so we do want to represent. Can't have them winning trophies because we know that's not what they're about. And so basically it would be brilliant if you would do that. You can go to Twitter and do it. You can do it on other social channels. And of course you can just do it on their website, and there's no registration or sign up or anything like that. So just something you can do if you're so inclined, and I'll get tweets out on how to do that. So with that out of the way, that self-indulgent nonsense out of the way, for patrons, I will let you know that the Brentford rewatch is coming. We just haven't had a chance to get it out yet, but we got 2 weeks of a hell of a lot of nothing. Again, it's crazy. The month of September, I think we're going to play once. Like, absolutely wild. But anyway, all right, let's get into this. So, Tim, there are very few times that I want to talk about Tottenham Hotspur, but we have a derby coming up, and there does seem to be this weird fascination with Tottenham's position in the table, their results, and how they're playing. And so I thought it was a decent time for us to ask the question, what do we think of Tottenham? Now, I think shit. But when I say that on social channels, I've gotten a lot of blowback. And to be fair, I like to think that our podcast is about having an actual debate about things and not just falling into tribal cliches. So we can get the cliche out there. They're all the shit. But let's have it out. Let's have a discussion. What are Tottenham doing right now? Firstly, do you think there's any possible meat on the bone that Conte could go to Juve? And could it be good timing for us to have this out in the ether prior to the derby?
Yeah, so on the Juve links, I mean, I certainly not now. All the stuff I've read and heard is that Juve are not prepared to act on the Allegri thing yet. Actually, Juve are not a massively trigger-happy club with their managers. They do tend to give them time. They did with Pirlo, for example, probably longer than they should have. Like they generally give their managers time. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being Conte's next club, whenever that is. But I think all the noises from Turin are definitely nothing will happen yet with Juve. And if it does, it won't be till the World Cup. So
okay,
there is no doubt that he would be linked with that. And yeah, you've got to think he'd be interested, right? I know he's managed there before, but to do a similar job to the one that he did at Inter, where Inter hadn't won the league for a few years, and he came back and just kind of said, right, let's win you the league, shall we? Thanks, done that. And then off he went to his next job, which seems to be more in keeping, really, because this Tottenham job, it doesn't feel to me like he's in this for the long haul at all. It feels like he was maybe waiting for the Man United job, didn't get it, and thought, oh, I really want to work again. and there have been a couple of times where, and I know this is Conte's whole thing, right? He always threatens to leave and says he hates the board and all of that. But it really felt like this summer, it really looked to me like after Conte got them fourth, he was like, look, spend a stack of money this summer, otherwise I'm off, because they did their business early as well. And that to me showed that they were like, okay, Mr. Conte, we'll spend all the money you want us to spend, Mr. Conte. Please stay, Mr. Conte. and he did. But I don't think anyone thinks that this is any kind of long-term relationship. And as much as Juve might be looking at Conte, as a kind of striking up a summer romance again. Pochettino's kind of lurking as well, and we already know that Spurs did entertain, before they got Conte, did entertain the idea of bringing Pochettino back. In fact, that looked relatively likely at one point. So you could end up with it won't happen now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Conte goes back to Juve and Pochettino comes back to Spurs at some point in the next year.
Well, let me ask you on the Pochettino thing. Would you welcome that? I mean, I tend to think it doesn't work well when you do that. I don't think going back tends to work. But do you have a sense that it could be a good fit and he might find the magic again? Of all the options they have, he's one I'd rather they pass on, because there are guys out there that would be funnier. Certainly
Santo.
Some gilet wearing former coaches that I would rather see back. But what's your take on if they did go that direction?
I agree with you. I don't necessarily think it'd work. I don't think they'd be a bad team by any means, because Pochettino's a really good coach, but it's not his team anymore.
Right.
And in fact, when you look at Spurs, basically, as much as it sticks in the craw to say it, they used to be a really good all-round team. And one by one, little bits have started to come. So Lloris is 35, right? He's been their goalkeeper for the last 10 years. That's going to be an issue for them. Vertonghen and Alderweireld have gone, and I'm not sure Davinson Sanchez is like the answer to that. To be fair, Romero does look quite good, even if he's a red card waiting to happen. Like Ali's gone, and they haven't really replaced him. Ericsson went. I don't think they've really replaced him. Basically, what's happened is that team has been stripped back, and it really kind of is just Kane and Son. And that's don't get me wrong, that's the best part of their team. But, it reminds me of like when we watch, obviously like from a much higher level, right? When you watch the Invincibles start getting stripped away, and it's like, it kind of just is Henry now, isn't it? It's not like Henry, Perez, Bergkamp, Vieira, and you watch them go one by one, and you're like, well, it's probably the best one, arguably, but it's still just one. And I think that's where Spurs are. And I don't think Conte will want a bar of that long-term project of trying to replace Kane and Son, like when that happens. But it's not Pochettino's team. And even like it was going downhill, like he left for a reason, right? Because it was going downhill, and the signings he'd brought in or that were brought in for him, I'm not really clear on that, like Ndombele, players like that, just didn't work. And so I'm not sure not even picking up from where he left off, probably picking up overall not as good a team as the one that he at least moulded into his own image. I'm not sure how that would go, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because this whole Tottenham thing feels like a house of cards built on top of Kane and Son. That's what it feels like to me. And Tottenham have not had a player like Kane in their history. They may not have a player like him again. And certainly, whatever his future is, this can only last for so long. I would reject the idea that they can reproduce this. And I would reject the idea that the way they play football can work absent the talent they have. The interesting question that a lot of people are asking right now is whether it's working even with the talent they have. And a lot of people say, well, they're undefeated. They're making a genuine title challenge. Rodri has come out and said they're going to make a title challenge. I mean, I'm not sure why that matters. Obviously, they're not going to make a title challenge. I think the issue is that there are people that look at what they're doing and believe that it is sustainable because they do have that talent up front, and they have a system that is designed to basically do one thing: get the ball to the talented upfront players as quickly as possible and have them create high quality chances with their exceptional skill. I do think a lot of the narrative around Tottenham, Tim, might be different if their game at City hadn't been postponed. Now, I know they always beat City somehow, but it would have been a really interesting referendum on what's now going to be a referendum in our game, which is the good, right way to play football, my words, versus the bad, terrible way to play football, again, my words, theirs, and seeing, because some would just say, well, they're just a counterattacking side. I have thoughts on that, but let's start with this. Do you feel that what they're doing is a reasonable and suitable way to make the most out of that elite attacking talent they have up front? As some people suggest it is.
Yeah, well, so there's a few interesting things going on there. I think we should reference as well. Son was dropped recently,
Yeah.
but then he came on and scored a hat trick because the thing is with Son, like he hadn't been playing well up to that point, and because the thing is with Son, if he's not scoring, he's not actually a brilliant all round player. He's a
Hmm.
brilliant like way of scoring goals and pinning teams back and running in behind and making you ragged and all of that. But if you give him the ball in the middle of the pitch. Like he's not a fantastic footballer, and I don't say that as an insult. Arsenal have had plenty of those over the years, and I've loved them because they're
Right.
great in the final third. So who cares? But you know, while it seemed like for a while it wasn't massively working for Son, so he's and obviously they've spent a lot of money on Richarlison this summer, and the whole point of that, I have to say, I think that was a really good signing just because he can fill in for both of them. And he can give them both a little bit of a break. He can play with them. Like I have to say, I think that was quite a smart piece of business. And he's Premier League ready, so I think he's kind of ready
Hmm.
to do that. But of course, Son comes on and scores a hat trick against Leicester, so that's that problem solved. The quintessential question around Spurs at the moment that I don't think any of us really know the answer to, because so they got 17 points from out of 21 so far. They're a point behind us. Like
Yeah.
that's they're doing well. Okay,
Hmm.
like they're getting good results, but I don't think anyone thinks that they're particularly playing well. And even like their underlying stats aren't fantastic. So the question is, are Spurs like going through a sticky patch of performances but still banking up the points and therefore will look really dangerous when they actually look good? Or are they just really brilliantly in Premier League terms anyway, not in the Champions League, but brilliantly in Premier League terms, just negotiating poor form? Or are they shit and getting lucky and this isn't sustainable? That's the $1 million question. And like, because basically, if their performances continue like this, I don't think it's sustainable, even if you say, oh, but they're a counter-attacking team and all they want to do is get the ball to Kane and Son. And there is more than a germ of truth in that. But if even in that respect, I don't think they've looked brilliant this season. And I can tell because, again, I have to say, I think in the second half of last season, they did look really good doing that, right? Whatever you think of how entertaining or attractive the football is, I was watching them in the spring and thinking, yeah, this is a team that just looks like a good counter-attacking team. I don't think Tottenham look like that at the moment. And so that's the question. Are they going to get better? And these are like scary results they're getting in their good period. The other thing I'd read about Conte as well is that he's very, very keen on periodization, and that if you look deeper into some of their pressing metrics, they actually press more in the final 20 minutes of games. And so there's a suggestion that Conte kind of does this standoffish thing on purpose so that A, they can be more effective late in games, but also so they can be more effective later in the season in terms of their intensity. So these are all questions that will come out in the wash in the next few months.
Do you mind if I hit you with some stats here now, just as
Go
an
for it.
interlude? People can mute this and at this point have a conversation with their partner. So the big debate, Tim, for me, is people say it's effective football, and I think the word effective is something we use when you get results in a way that people don't like looking at, right? So the question is, what is effective? I want to recall. Do you remember? We had a coach named Unai Emery. Goes back a little way. Do you remember that?
I, 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 I
Doesn't
think.
ring a bell.
Did you ever see Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I had that treatment done.
I was going to go with the Men in Black flashy thing, neuralizer. But do you remember the 22 game unbeaten run?
I vaguely recall it. Yeah,
We had a lot of conversations about that on the pod. And to be fair, a lot of them that weren't very popular because I think we were a bit of a wet blanket at that time. But the point of the doubt that we cast on the 22 game unbeaten run was, if we keep playing this way, are we going to see results start to come back to what the performances suggest they should? So let me hit you with a few data points here, because I think that they will be interesting at the least. So first, let's look at, I know looking at Tottenham gives us nausea. And by the way, if you're saying, why are we talking about Tottenham? Two reasons. One, we play them next, so we want to understand what we have coming up. Two, they are our rival, and they have finished above us, and it is time for us to retake our natural place. And because I do think it is relevant because they are one of the teams outside of Manchester City. They're a team we can and must get over this season, in my view. So, Tim, a few things here. Firstly, if you look at their games, everybody says, oh, Arsenal haven't played anybody yet. When you played United, you lost. Well, we outplayed United in my view, but yes, that's true. Okay. Tottenham have won against Southampton, Wolves, Nottingham Forest, Fulham, and a Leicester City team that is desperate for Rodgers to go. In several of those games, by the way, including the Leicester City game, the expected goals were roughly even. I mean, against Leicester City, who they beat 6-2, they scored a lot of brilliant goals. It was 1.7 to 1.7 on expected goals. Okay. In the Champions League, they played twice. Pounded Marseille, got beat 2-0 by Sporting. All right. That's what they've done so far. In the other games where they played competent teams, Chelsea away, they got drubbed in my view, but they had a 2-2 draw. And West Ham away, I also think they kind of got drubbed and got a 1-1 draw. So they have the same situation we do, you could argue, which is they've played basically nobody. When they've played somebody, they haven't done great. When they've played nobody, they've won. And in some instances, they still didn't do great. So I don't know why we're going gaga over them. Their expected goal difference, okay? And this is important. So can I frame this conversation slightly differently, Tim? The one thing I want to point out is when I'm saying I don't think Tottenham are good, I don't mean they're going to finish 10th. I mean, I think the ceiling of their ambition with the way they play is 4th. I think 74 points, 71 points, 76 points. I think that's doable for them. I don't think 82, 83, 84, beyond. I don't think that kind of stuff is doable the way they're playing. Okay, their expected goal difference right now is roughly around the range of what 4th place finishes at every single season, roughly. They have a 0.65 expected goals per 90. We have a 1 expected goal per 90 difference. Manchester City have a 1.75. Both of those are more in line with what you'd expect at the top of the table. I promise I'm going to stop with the data dump in a second here. But this is the one that riled people up on Twitter. So, Tim, are you familiar with field tilt?
I am indeed, yes.
Okay, so field tilt is not possession. Let me be clear about what it is. It is the percent of final third touches for you versus the other team. So if there are 100 final third touches, and I have 80 of them and you have 20 of them, I have 80% of the field tilt. In 2019, here are the top 4 teams in field tilt. 2019, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, United. Arsenal, who were dreadful, finished mid-table in that. City, Liverpool, Chelsea, United. Okay? In 2020, here were the top 4 teams, top 5 teams. City, Liverpool, Chelsea, United, Arsenal. In 2021, here were the top 4 teams. City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal. And in 2022, as of right now, here are the top 4 teams. City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea. Tottenham Hotspur are 16th. 17th. They have 40% field tilt, meaning that for every 100 final third touches, their opponent has 60 of them. Tim, the reason I think this matters is because this is a team that isn't just counter-attacking. It's not about that. This is a team that makes it very easy to progress the ball into their defensive third and very rarely gets it into the opposition final third. And if you look at a chart of all of the teams over the last 10 years that have played that way, Tottenham are way out on the outlier range of any of those teams in terms of their success, in terms of getting goals versus conceding goals. So when you hear all these advanced metrics, and I realize that's a lot of data dump, so I apologize, does it give you pause to say it stands in opposition to the idea that their approach long-term can be successful? Or do you think it ignores the fact that with elite attacking talent, a different approach makes sense? How compelling is the data to you as a counterfactual for the argument that they can be successful doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of listeners will be kind of saying now is like, yeah, but they keep finishing in the top 4. So they keep being this outlier. So that does suggest sustainability. But I think the thing is, it's sustainability based very, 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 very intently around the availability of well, I'll say 2 players. To be fair, Kane's been injured quite a bit. He wasn't last season, but he's been injured quite a few seasons. So, but they have Son as well, right? So he tends to be able to carry it off on his own as well. So really, you look at, if they lost both of them, they'd be fucked. We
Yeah.
all know that.
Yeah.
But like, I almost feel like that's redundant saying that. Like, it's, if the Invincibles had lost Vieira and Henri for 6 months, they would have been, maybe not because, again, better team and all of that. But do you know what I mean? Any team loses its 2 best players, of course, they're to some degree fucked. But I think Tottenham would be really, 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 really fucked. But I feel like that's a bit of a statement in the obvious. For me, what's real, like, they're still going to be strong this season, right? I still think, like, maybe both of us will get in the top 4 this year. I think that's like, Spurs are definitely going to be there or thereabouts. And it might be one of us third, one of us fourth. I kind of do see this season potentially going that way. The more interesting question for me is, like, what next? Like, what do they do next? Because they're not going to have Conte when that question comes up.
No.
So Conte's not planning for that future. He's already made remarks about, like, they signed Jed Spence this summer, and Conte kind of said very explicitly, it's not my signing. Like, Conte doesn't want 21-year-olds and 21-year-old wing-backs. Wing-backs are a very, very crucial position in his team. And, like, the data you've just laid out there kind of explains why, because they don't really play with the midfield.
Right. Yep.
And this is the other interesting thing about them, is that they're not playing any of their new signings yet. And this isn't unfamiliar with Conte, because he's such a system coach that he wants players to learn the system before. There are like there are I was going to say objections. That's not exceptions. There are exceptions, like Kulusevski, but Kulusevski was like, he fits this system and he's already played under me, so he knows it, and everything
Richarlison's
like that.
played a bit, I guess, in the absence of Sonia.
But Bissouma's not starting.
No.
Like, they're still going with Højbjerg and I can't remember their other. Like, their midfield just seems to be in anything other than just sitting in front of the back. Like, they play with a back 3 with a double pivot in front of it. Like, that kind of tells you a little bit about how much they're set up to absorb pressure.
Yeah, Bentancur, Eric Dyer starts for them. Like, it's just, and maybe the fair point is, Conte has developed a system that lets them play with Sanchez, Langlet, Dyer, Højbjerg, Bentancur, and still win football matches. Maybe he's a damn genius, right? I mean, like, but
Emerson Royale is playing, and everyone hates
him. They hate him. They literally hate him. You know what? That's a fair point. I mean, there is an argument. I mean, if you look at some of the complaints I've had with Arteta prior to this season, we talked about Goldilocks systems, right? And it only works if all the exact right players are available, because we have struggled with some mediocre teams, let's be fair, to be even decent. If we didn't have a good team, we were 8th, right? And I look at guys like Romero and Dyer and Langlet, Emerson, Højbjerg, Bentancur. I mean, it's a cavalcade of mediocrity, and they're making it work. So I do think Conte deserves credit for that. I think the thing you have to remember, though, is basically the last 4 seasons, they've been somewhere between like 52 points or whatever and 71. I think 71 is roughly the ceiling for the way they want to play, the talent they have, and what they're doing. Now, you can say, but that's a good team. If that's the ceiling of your ambition, then yes, they can be a good team. They can be a 4th place team, roughly. What I'm saying is, I don't think that they can get beyond that as they are currently going about things. Really.
And also, I think the other thing we probably forget, because they finished above us on the last day, was the last time we finished 8th, they finished 7th, like, what, a point above us? So they were just as crap, and we were
crap. Yeah,
they were just as crap as we were, like, under Mourinho. And I guess the thing is, they've got, like, Kane and Son are in those peak years, probably just beginning to. I mean, we're not seeing it yet, but, like, it's coming. We know it's coming. The kind of the slight tail off, and they've got a coach who is not interested in anything beyond this season. So, like, short term, they're going to be dangerous. They're going to be dangerous next weekend. They're going to be dangerous for our area of the table. Like, absolutely no doubt about it. I'm reasonably confident that from, like, I don't know, 2020, maybe next season, maybe the season after, they could be, they're in for some, like, you look at Liverpool at the moment, and Liverpool have been, like, perfect at everything. And even they are struggling with the age curve now of some of their players. Just replacing one player like Mane is causing them a lot of problems at the moment. And Liverpool are a lot better than Spurs are. So, and look, we've seen it ourselves. We've been through it ourselves many times, that when you kind of cycle off, as it were, I do wonder what Tottenham's plan is going to be at that point, because Conte, that's not going to be. Conte's not even thinking about that, let alone is he going to be in charge of that. So it's like, who is going to be in charge of that for Spurs? Maybe Pochettino again. And do you know what? Actually, to go back to our earlier discussion, maybe that would make him a decent appointment if you just go, all right, this team needs knocking down and building up again, like you did last. Can you just do what you did last time, please?
Yeah.
And knock it down and build it up again. And I don't know, maybe that's a better job for a manager like Pochettino than PSG and begging Neymar and Mbappe to press and them laughing at him. But yeah, so I unfortunately, I do think what they're doing is sustainable for this season. I do. I'm not sure I see a long-term future for it, though.
Yeah, I think the way I would say it is, it probably, if I wanted to give Conte credit, I would say it is probably a brilliant approach to get as much juice from the squeeze as you can with this group. They are not going to play attractive football with the players they have. Now, some of that is what he chose. But to be fair, if you've got Harry Kane pushing 30 on dodgy ankles, Heung-min Son at 30, and you want to maximize what you can do with them, they don't press, they don't run around, they stand, up the pitch, and they wait for the ball to get to them, and then they switch on. They're going to the World Cup. He's got to maximize them, through that season. We'll see how it works. I mean, my argument is essentially that there's a ceiling to what that can do.
And in terms of looking after those front two, look at where they've spent the money. Kulusevski, Richarlison, they've spent money on foil for those guys, on guys who can come on for them, come in for them, or in Kulusevski's case, do all their running. That's where they're allocating their resource. They're allocating their resource into the area that's already pretty strong.
Yeah,
and that's why they've got Højbjerg in midfield, who again, to be fair, for a Conte system, if you just want a destroyer in the middle of the pitch, he did that with Conte.
Conte get the ball to Diego Costa, and exactly.
Yeah, precisely. So it does work. And look, Conte's no idiot. He's built these systems at every team he's been at, and he's had success every time. So
I'll say this though, you got to win. You got to win with it, because we've all been there. There is a lot more patience for attractive, fun football than there is for ugly, cynical football that gets results. It's why Mourinho wears out his welcome so quickly, and I think there are a lot of Spurs fans that are really happy right now, but under the surface, if you pick at it, there's a lot of Spurs fans talking about the football not being particularly attractive or compelling. So we'll see which wins out. What frustrates me, Tim, is that I really do think, especially because we lost to United with counterattacking goals going against that, we rewatched both halves on Patreon. The second half in particular, we were fantastic. I know nobody wants to hear that because we lost. We didn't lose because we were naive. They were absolutely on it in the counterattack that game. We maybe got a little too, maybe this is naive, we maybe got a little too exuberant after scoring the goal thinking we had them, but we did have them. What bothers me is this game is going to be a referendum on the right way to do it. If Spurs somehow get a result in the derby, there's going to be column inches filled on Arsenal's pretty football, no match for Spurs counterattack. And Tottenham have beaten Manchester City basically every time they played them the last few seasons, or at least not dropped points. Manchester City keep finishing with mid-90s points and win leagues, and Tottenham once have finished over 70 points. The counterattacking style, I still think there's a right way to play football if you want to accrue maximum points to start challenging for titles. And in my view, that way of playing is controlling the ball in dangerous areas and scoring lots of goals doing it. And so I think we're going to win the derby. I hope we win the derby. Regardless of what happens in that game, I do not think it's a referendum on the right way to play, because the goal isn't to win the derby. The goal is to win the title. let's be honest. I know the whole top four is a trophy thing. Yeah, we want to be top four. The goal of this project is to open a window that we can do what Liverpool did, walk through it and be a champion, be a Premier League title winning team. And we can get there playing this way. And I don't think you can get there playing that way, not in this current league. So how do you feel about this, the derby coming up, in terms of people wanting to use it as a referendum on style? Or are we comfortable saying the style we're using is the right style for this project long term? Let's not make it a referendum on that.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be, because there's an element of what wins the battle and what wins the war.
Exactly. Well said. Yes.
Going on. And one of the things, I guess, as an aside, that's interesting with City at the moment, and I think understandably I'm expecting them to walk away with the title, but like they keep going behind in games. But what's really clear is that bringing in Haaland has sacrificed an element of control for them that they kind of like, but he scores so many goals it almost doesn't matter. So they're almost like moving into Spurs territory in a weird way, in that they're becoming more built around an absolutely elite striker rather than having six midfielders and not giving you the ball all the time. But like, absolutely, I think it's more likely that what will happen is if we don't win, people will come away and look with a fair amount of justification and say, well, look, you've played Tottenham and Man United so far this season and not won either of them. So what really are your aspirations? I think my response to that would be, well, look, if we beat the other 14 teams twice, 13, because, well, we can beat ourselves. We've seen that many
we
times
often do,
years, but, and look, no one ever gets like absolutely 6 points off of all of those teams all of the time. But, that's 78 points up for grabs right there. So, I think that would be my response, and that actually once we grow a little bit more into this style of football, that then maybe it will be like a bit better in the bigger games. But then we really played like this at home to City last season, and we really should have won that game. So I think you've got to do you. I think that's the lesson of any good team. Like when Leicester won the league in 2016, I remember all these kind of, well, maybe counter-attacking football's the way to do it now. And it's like, no, the lesson of Leicester is not to play like Leicester. The lesson of Leicester is to play to your strengths. And
the lesson of Leicester is have the second place team only have 71 points that season and win the title with a number that's never won it before. I mean, not to take anything away from them, but that's part of the lesson, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But like, we're clearly building a team long term that can play this way and that can hopefully get better at playing this way and better and better. And again, I don't see that with Spurs. I see them at the end rather than at the beginning of something. So look, if we lose to Spurs, all of that is going to happen, and all of the guys who cover like Spurs for The Athletic, for example, will be like, told you, and all of this, and we are just going to have to eat that and see how the whole season plays out ultimately. But I think I'm with you. Like I'm not as concerned by what Spurs are doing, because it does suit them at the moment. At the moment, it suits them. I'm more interested in how they handle the upcoming transition that they've got, and I'm not sure. I say I'm not confident. I don't want them to handle it well, so I don't want to have confidence. But you know what I mean. I'm not sure.
No, I know
where that question is. But in terms of this game, what the North London derby in recent years shows you as well is that home advantage really matters. We've moved into this kind of period where the home team usually wins the derby. And obviously, I think the more that happens, the more the pressure does come on when you're playing at home. And like, I'd almost rather play them away next weekend and just kind of go, do you know what? Draw would be fine here, or like could live with a draw. It feels like we have to win this game, if you know what I mean. And look, we've built up like a good enough point bank that a draw, certainly no type of disaster or anything like that. But it does feel a little bit more like we've got to win this game. And I do think, even though we've only got one more point than Spurs this season, it does feel like more of the focus has been on us because we've been at the top of the league, whereas they've only been 1 point behind. And I think that does bring a little bit of extra pressure, but I also don't really know how incidental it is for anything other than people like us who have to talk about it on podcasts. I don't really know whether that has any impact on the players or the coach. I suspect not.
Yeah, I think we can start to move on to a couple other things in the league and general topics that I had in mind. I think it's going to be really interesting. It is definitely the case that, look, I'm old enough to remember when Arsenal had a coach named Arsene Wenger, a manager named Arsene Wenger, and there were some seasons there where we lost 5-1 to Liverpool and 6-0 to Chelsea and finished top four. Now, I realize the league has changed. And to some extent, you can't just get battered by the top six and still finish top four because one of the other ones will get in there. But to your point about winning the battle and winning the war, I think Spurs have proven that their approach can win them big games against good teams, maybe even more than we have proven that our approach can. And that is an interesting point to consider. But I think in terms of just point accumulation, I like what we're doing. And maybe this is the point where you say focus on ourselves. Our metrics are great. Whatever you think of whether their metrics are okay or they're terrible, their football's effective or their football's rubbish. Our football works, period. That's clear. It worked against United. It didn't get the result. And I know there's some people listening that will bristle at that and say, but that's the point. But you can play well and not get, like, if the only way you can ever evaluate football is if you got the result, that's going to be tricky because even Manchester City loses games, right? No one's gone unbeaten since Arsenal in 2003, 2004. So, like, if you don't go unbeaten, there's going to be a game where you lose. Does that mean your football isn't good? I don't think that's what that means. So I want to talk a little bit actually about Liverpool and the wider Premier League. I think there's some things changing there. And sort of look ahead to the challenge of what we have going on and realistically what we can achieve. But I also need to tell you that UEFA Champions League soccer is back, streaming on Paramount Plus. 9 months of heart-stopping, hold your breath exhilaration is underway with the biggest stars, top teams, and craziest fan bases across Europe. Watch every match from the group stage through the knockout round as Benzema and Real Madrid defend their title against Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, PSG, Barcelona, and more. In soccer's biggest club competition, so don't miss a single sweat-soaked second. Regulation time, stoppage time, and extra time. And stream every match of the UEFA Champions League live exclusively on Paramount Plus and the Europa League, because that's what we're in. Now, you want to be healthy? No, you don't want to be healthy. Do you? Yeah, no. Yeah, you do. Of course you do. Do you want to have 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens? No? Of course you do. You want to sleep better, have more energy, have more focus, have better gut health? No, yeah, of course you do. It means you take AG1. That's what I do. I got in a big bottle. You take the AG1, you drink the AG1, you feel better from the AG1. Why? Because it has those adaptogens, those minerals, vitamins. It's food source, so it actually stays in your body instead of going off into your pee. It's lifestyle friendly. So keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free. It costs less than your expensive coffee that you're wasting money on. It doesn't make you healthy. You can have both, by the way. It has over 7,000 five-star reviews. And by the way, it's made by a company that believes in philanthropy, much as we do. It donated over 1.2 million meals to kids, by the way, in 2020. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/vision. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/vision to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And this podcast is sponsored by BetterHealth. Look, BetterHelp. Pardon me. See, I need to say it right. BetterHelp. And people do make that mistake, so make sure you don't make that mistake. It's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P. This is really simple. Mental health is something we should talk about in the way we talk about any health. You talk about spraining your ankle like I did this summer. You talk about having high blood pressure. You talk about your mental health. Do it. It will make you a healthier person just by talking about it and acknowledging it as an issue. You got to be in problem-solving mode. Life isn't just about, hey, now I'm in crisis. If you solve problems in advance, you can avoid a crisis. BetterHelp lets you find a therapist that fits your needs, that may be geared towards a specialty you might need. These are licensed therapists. You can get matched with them in under 48 hours. You can do it camera on or camera off, so you can have as much privacy as you want. You can change therapists if you need to at any time. It's also less expensive than in-person therapy, and that may not even be available where you are. So when you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/ArsenalVision today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/ArsenalVision. Okay, lastly, because we always have to tell you about the hiring partner that lets you attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Look, if you aren't using Indeed right now, basically you don't care about your business. It's that simple. Do you care about your business? Just like your health? You better. Indeed's data shows over 80% of employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Instant Match is one of the features. We've talked about virtual interviews. We've talked about all these things. But Instant Match, basically, as soon as you sponsor a job post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Sponsor a job, boom. Instant Match shows you candidates right then. That's it. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent faster. Remember, they're the one place where you don't pay if you don't get the candidates that you need. Remember? So like it should work that way. And it does work that way. Indeed knows that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. Visit Indeed.com/Blue Wire to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per person not available for everyone. You need to hire. Tim?
Yeah.
Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Oh, that is all. It's weird, right? Like at one point in time, I was like so sheepish about doing the ad reads, but they're so cathartic. I get all this like emotion out into them. I'm able to pour all this excess energy into them, and I find it quite releasing. So, if you don't enjoy it, I totally understand. You can go to Patreon, listen to the ad-free version, but I am going to continue to do them in that fashion if you will stick with us. Tim, okay. Hard to believe anyone ever voted for this thing as best Premier League podcast. So, Tim, Liverpool's an interesting one. I think one of the things we sometimes forget is that there are cycles and they end. There's this weird thing, right? So like we used to live in a world where the United and Arsenal had more resources than everyone, right? Madrid and Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Juve and AC Milan. And so those teams were just always at the top of their league. They were always at the top of their league, right? If Madrid had a down cycle, Tim, it meant that they were like in the quarterfinal of the Champions League and finished second or third. When they have their up cycle, they win both. And that's how it used to be for Arsenal. That's how it used to be for United. But it has fundamentally changed. And I think the thing we have to wrap our brain around a little bit is you're going to have a window now. You're going to have a cycle where you get good players together, you get the right manager, you grow into it together, and you open a window to be top 4, maybe top 3, maybe top 2, maybe a title winner, maybe go far in the Champions League or win it. And then those players will start to age or they'll start to get picked off and that window will start to close and you will have to start again. And when you start again, you will likely have to absorb some body blows and go down a little bit. Now, all right, if you're resourced the way like a City are, you may never have to do that. But for, I think, every other team really, and maybe even City eventually when Pep leaves, that's going to happen. It's happening to Liverpool in reverse of what's happening to us. And I wanted to get your take on this idea of windows because I think we're in a critical moment now. We are at the start of the kind of window we saw them have. The group is together, the core of it, the guts of it. The manager's in place. The football looks like it's in place. We are starting to see what it can do. That will not last forever, right? At some point, maybe 3 seasons from now or 4 seasons from now, the players will start to get picked off or leave. Maybe 1 or 2 start aging out like a Thomas Partey, like a Granit Xhaka in a season or so, and you have to start replacing. Do you think it's fair to say that maybe Liverpool's window is just closing, but also that ours is open and now the expectations have to be that these next few seasons are fundamentally our opportunity to go do whatever we think this project we keep hearing about can do?
That's definitely the attitude that Arsenal, the club, should be taking. Arsenal should be saying Liverpool look vulnerable, Chelsea look vulnerable, Tottenham, like we've been discussing, maybe look vulnerable as well, and that this is our time kind of thing. City's a different thing altogether because they're players that age out. David Silva, brilliant player, no one notices he's gone because they've got Phil Foden. Fernandinho, brilliant player, no one notices he's gone because they spent 50 million on Rodri 2 years ago, allowed him to settle in. Sterling, Gabriel Jesus have gone, but they've got Haaland. And so, it doesn't happen as easily when you've got infinite money. For Liverpool, I think there are a couple of things going on. Obviously, most of their team is the same age, which is brilliant until they all get old together. But and I think the thing for Liverpool is at the moment what they've been doing is remodelling that front line, because they had Firmino, Mane, Salah, all exactly the same age on exactly the same level of contract. And what they've done is, love, kill, marry type of thing. They've gone, we can't renew all of them. We shouldn't do that. And so what we should probably do is let one run down, Firmino, sell one, Mane, and then put our money into Salah. So that's kind of what they're doing. And they already brought in Jota, they've got Nunez, they've got Diaz. So they're trying to remodel that front line. The issue they've really got, I think, is in midfield, where their midfield's starting to look quite old now. And guys like Henderson and Milner can't do what they used to do. Now, they have got players underneath that, like Carvalho and Harvey Elliott, who look like really good players. I think Curtis Jones looks like a decent player, but he's had injury problems. So, they're not quite there with that midfield. And I think that they really want Bellingham, I think they've wanted that for quite a while. They brought in Thiago as a bit of a sticking plaster for a couple of years, and he's been injured. They brought in Keita, he's been injured. So they've been done by injuries a little bit in that midfield area as well. And that's, I think, quite a big problem for them. And that's beginning to expose some of the weaknesses we know they have in defence, like behind Alexander-Arnold. And now Virgil van Dijk, he's getting older as well, and he's had an ACL. And I think it's too early to say that he's on a downward curve. But this season, Virgil van Dijk had evolved to this amazing position where people didn't even try to take him on. There was that statistic about how he hadn't been beaten by a dribble for 17 years or something. It's because no one tried.
I think it was 16, but yeah.
But it's because no one tried. Everyone was just I'll go somewhere else. See you later kind of thing. And maybe he's lost a little bit of that. I don't know. Maybe I think it's more to do with their structure. The midfield is not quite the solid block it once was, basically. I'm not sure Henderson can do that, covering Alexander-Arnold's arse as much as he used to. And that's a difficult thing to buy for, because what they've got at the moment is Harvey Elliott really likes that right side of midfield, and he's a brilliant player, but he's not Jordan Henderson. He's not going to go in and fill it and play almost as a right back to cover Alexander-Arnold. He wants to go forward and he wants to create and things like that. So that right side looks vulnerable all of a sudden. And basically it's a whack-a-mole thing, right? You pick at little places, you get exposed a little bit. And I think one of the big things that probably happened to Liverpool was COVID. And COVID probably, because that's when they gave Van Dijk the big new contract. They gave a lot of guys in their late 20s, early 30s new contracts, because they obviously decided that was more cost effective than replacing them. Whereas had it not been for that COVID year financially, where a lot of clubs were very uncertain, they might have got Bellingham a year earlier. They might have been able to go and do something like that. And look, they're not paupers.
And get bigger money for the players they wanted, right? If there had been a 100 million market for Salah, would they have moved on? If there had been a 100 million market for Van Dijk, there wasn't at that time. Yeah,
exactly. They got 30 million for Mane. Still good business to get for a 30-year-old, but absent COVID,
not Coutinho money.
Exactly. Yeah, and absent COVID, you probably could have added another 15 million onto that. So I do think that their team build has been impacted by that a little bit. And of course, we've got these questions as well around, isn't this about the time that the Dortmund thing went sour for Klopp? And look, that might be a coincidence. We don't know that this is a permanent thing. It might just be they've got a couple of injuries. They're settling some guys in. I'm expecting them to have a strong season. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they're going to win the league. I basically don't think they can almost anymore.
They're going to be good, and they're going to be in the top four. Yeah,
exactly. But again, longer term, how do they fix some of these little potholes that have started to appear?
And this is the thing, look, fans don't have to be on board with project thinking. You don't have to be. If you want to expect every season to be a success, you're absolutely entitled to do that. Seasons aren't there to be discarded. As fans, look, start thinking about how many years you have left on this planet. That's how many football seasons you have left. Everyone that your club just throws away in pursuit of a project is a season of your life gone, right? So,
and no one puts the season ticket prices down and says, do you know what, this year we might finish 7th.
Right? Good point. Yeah, this is a project season. Your season ticket's cut in half. But clubs have to think in terms of projects. They have to. And I think what's interesting with Liverpool, for example, is the reason we talk about them a lot is they are the apotheosis of how a project can work. And there's always luck Always some. Like, look at Leicester. They won the league in a season where everybody else stunk. But like Liverpool have done it in a really impressive way. They made a decision. They had to stick or twist. Do we start over a new project, or do we stretch the window as far as we can with this group? They opted to stretch. And that may be, as you pointed out, Tim, the COVID market not giving them the kind of return on the sales that they would have needed to start over. So they stretched. And what I mean by stretched is they held on to a Thiago and a Salah and a Van Dijk to say, we think we can get another title out of this group. Maybe Klopp said, guys, I'm not here for the next cycle. I'm here for what this can get. And we may be at the end of that, or maybe not. But I think it is interesting because in our current project, Tim, there's going to come a point where Real Madrid want Martinelli, or City want Saka, or somebody, Barca wants Saliba, or PSG wants it. It's going to happen. It's, if these players are as good as we think they are, then people are going to come for them. There's no way you can have the best players in the world and have nobody come for them. Now, Liverpool did sell. They sold Coutinho. That was the fundamental move they made. They sold Suarez before that, I guess, but that goes back a while. And they sold Coutinho, and they built around that. And I think the reason they were able to hold on to their players is they're a big club. They pay big wages, but they were winning titles in Champions League. They gave their players the belief that you could be at one of the biggest clubs in the world competing for the biggest trophies. I'm curious how you think about this in terms of, are we going to have to set our mindset right that we understand at some point there may be a piece of this group that we have to sell and replace, that this isn't necessarily linear, or should it be? Or how do you think about that? Because like, we haven't had good prime age players in a long time, so we haven't had anyone really coming for our good prime age players. Like, you have to go back to the sort of Fabregas, Van Persie, Nasri years to really experience the heartache of losing a player we actually cared about particularly. If anything, we've held on to players longer than we should have in this sort of iteration of Arsenal. So how do you think about that aspect of this project in terms of a willingness to understand that there may be pieces that move on to replace them with more pieces or better pieces, or however that works?
Yeah, definitely. And this is where, we are going to have to accept that. Definitely. I imagine there will be at some point at least one big, fairly reluctant sale. And then it's about what you do with that. Now, we could get lucky like Liverpool and have someone wildly overvalue one of our okay-ish players who probably doesn't even fit the system anyway, like with Coutinho, who, I think there was a objectively brilliant case for selling him anyway, even like absent that kind of level of a bid. I think also one of the things, maybe if we can make a good sale somewhere, maybe to offset that a little bit. So maybe look at a player who's good, but like find our Coutinho, as it were, like a player that's good, but maybe one we can stand to lose. But you're right, like we're not really in control of when it comes to like players like Saka, Martinelli, we're not really in control of that. I'm reasonably optimistic on players like Jesus and Zinchenko. We've got them at 25. They've kind of been at City already. So I think that gives us a little bit of added security, actually, because what you don't want is everyone's 21, and then when everyone's 23, you want that like slight mix. So I'm reasonably optimistic that like Jesus, Zinchenko, at least the next 3 years, absolutely fine. So those pillars are a bit more secure. Maybe, but maybe if we take a decision on someone, maybe somewhere where we've got players. And the other thing is, like, let's say like it happens and Man City come in for Saka and whatever, like being smart about how you replace those players. And that doesn't always, as we've seen and as Liverpool have shown, that doesn't always mean replacing them like for like. So like with the Coutinho money, Liverpool didn't go and buy another Coutinho. They bought a goalkeeper and a centre-half. And that's what we might have to do. We might have to look at allocating that money into inefficiencies. So look, if we have to sell Saka, for example, we're probably not going to be able to buy another Bukayo Saka. That's kind of not how it works. So you either try and reveal an inefficiency in the market in that position, or more likely you go, okay, we got a big stack of cash here. We can buy 2 players here, And, we can really look at an area where we think we're maybe weak. So maybe selling Saka like funds the Thomas Partey replacement or something, for example. And we've seen that before, right? When we sold Henry, we didn't go and buy another Henry. We bought Bakary Sagna the summer that we sold Henry. I'm not saying that those are directly linked. It's just the timeline. But, being smart about how you allocate the money when you get it as well, and not doing the kind of, oh my God, someone's just given us 50 million for Fernando Torres, whose hamstrings are hanging off the bone anyway, and then going and spending all the money on like Andy Carroll.
I hope our rivals do that in perpetuity. But
yeah, exactly.
I think the thing I would say is that, and this is what's so hard. The problem with comparing anything to Liverpool is not only did they have Klopp, who's special, and we might have someone who's special as well. They got a lot of luck and they got a lot of things right, and you can't get it right all the time. You almost have to get it right. The big moves have to get, we got it right with Gabriel Jesus. You can't get that wrong. You can't go get a striker and be wrong about it. For example, I think Liverpool might be wrong about Nunez. It's interesting. I was watching our scouting video on Patreon of Nunez again, and Clive and I were laughing at certain points. This is the guy. This was back in January when we were linked, and I was like, he's got the touch of an oxen. This is crazy. I'm not saying he's a bad player. He can run in behind and score tons of goals. But you know what I think is funny, by the way, just as an aside? Sometimes I think clubs have huge blind spots for players that play well against them. Nunez was good against Liverpool, and they bought Nunez. And I think that that's a trap that a lot of teams have fallen into. So let's finish with this, Tim. The Premier League is fundamentally changing. First of all, we're going to get an extra Champions League spot, right? We're going to go to 5, which fundamentally changes things. Are we then going to say top 5 is a trophy? Top 5 is good enough? The interesting reality is that what is good enough, to some extent, has always been driven by Champions League qualification as the bare minimum, but never really thought of in terms of the context of who's actually good in the league. Arsenal finished in Champions League places for 20 years under Arsene Wenger, and that is an amazing accomplishment. But it's also an accomplishment that should have been expected given the relative strength of Arsenal economically and the weakness of the teams around them. By and large, who was competing with us? For the first 10 years, no one but United, really, a bit of Liverpool. And then it was United and Chelsea and a bit of Liverpool and a bit of Tottenham, but mostly Arsenal. And then it was City, and then it did start to get hard. And now it's going to get harder still, because now you have teams every single season going forward. The following teams are going to expect to be in the Champions League: City, United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, and pretty soon Newcastle. City, Liverpool, United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Newcastle. That's 7. 7 doesn't go into 4. 7 doesn't go into 5. And so the reason I'm asking this, Tim, is I think, 5 out of 10 seasons, odds are you're probably not going to be in that group, because everybody in that group will expect that they should be there and consider it failure if they're not. Now, this isn't me saying we should lower our expectations, not remotely. But how do you square the notion that we should raise our expectations, that we shouldn't lower our expectations, with the reality that, from a resource standpoint, we are in a cluster of 7 teams, some of whom are about the same as us and some of whom are far beyond us in terms of their spending, and we are expecting to finish above at least 3 of them every single season, because that's the goal and beyond. But realistically, if you were an outsider looking in, you'd say, yeah, they'll probably do it 2 out of every 3 seasons or 3 out of every 5 seasons. But as fans, we're not prepared to accept that. How's that landscape change influence the way you think about our seasons and what we should be shooting for?
It definitely has. And look, this has already been happening anyway. Like you said, like Chelsea and City coming in already changed our expectations from competing for the title with United every year to kind of 3rd, 4th. And that was difficult. Like, we look at that now and say, wow, we finished 3rd or 4th like all those years. But people didn't like it at the time. I didn't always like it either, because we were used to being 1 or 2, and then it's like 3 or 4. And so, this stuff, it's like, it's been happening for a while, essentially. And then, like, during that period, like you said, Liverpool were very in and out, and they're not anymore. They're very, very much in. So it's one of those things where you kind of, I'd say, like, hope for the best and plan for the worst. Yeah, basically. And definitely in terms of expectations, I think, like, in an individual season, yeah, you should go in with the expectations that you have. But really, I think what you're looking for is a level of performance or a level of sustainability. Like last season, I'm okay with last season because I kind of think if even if like a couple of other things had gone a different way, like one injury less, I think we'd have done it. And because of like where we are on like the cycle and all of that, and as we've already discussed, like I'd be less accepting of that this year. I'd be less accepting of the idea that our left back being injured fucks us for the last 2 months of the season. But we've gone out and addressed that.
We have two good ones.
yeah, we've gone out and addressed that like very directly. So, we're on a different curve expectation wise. So yeah, like last season, I was thinking 6th, 5th, that's progress. Obviously, it was disappointing that we didn't get 4th, but so you kind of just have to go with the ebb and flow of it. And I think really you have like a micro focus and a macro focus. So the micro focus, like last season, was disappointing because it was in our hands and we threw it away. But the zoom out is, well, there were these circumstances, etc., etc. And I almost feel like you have to treat every season like that. So this season, yeah, I'm expecting to finish in the top 4. I think we're playing well enough. We bought good enough players. The football's good enough. Like, go out and do it. But, it might be that at the end of the season, when I zoom out, I might say, we got like 76 points and we didn't get in. Like it's kind of like that's a level of performance that gets you in a lot of years. And that's kind of like last year. Like last year, that would have got us in a lot of years. So
yeah,
I think
that's
you've
correct.
kind of got to think about it with 2 brains almost.
Yeah, and I think this is the hard thing for a lot of people because I think how do you zoom out when it comes to football? Football is the most emotional, tribal, energetic sort of sensation when it comes to the way you think about it. It's hard to zoom out. It's hard to be quote unquote objective. Objectivity is a thing people say you should have that nobody actually has. Right? People love to tell other people to be objective without ever actually being able to be objective themselves. But Tim, you want every season to be special and you want every season to be a title season. I think there's a difference between what fans have to think and what clubs have to think. But I think here's what I'm going to try to do for myself. I'm going to try to objectively at least say, do I think the club are doing the right things? Do I think we are dumb and bad or smart and good? If I think we are dumb and bad, I'm generally going to be unhappy. Even if we finish 5th and grab that last Champions League place, I'm not going to say, oh, it's success, because I'm going to be like, well, we got there, but the process is bad. We're not going to be good for very long. If I think we're smart and good, we're buying quality players in the right age bracket to build the right project in the positions of need, and we're playing the right kind of football that I think has the ceiling. Like, because the goal should be to win a title every, 10 years? Can we at least ask for that? Right? 1 in 10 years, compete for one every 7 or 8 years. We haven't been doing it, but that should be the goal. The only way you're going to get there is by doing things right. I think we're going to have some ability to look at process. And if we think the process is right, but it yields failure, it's okay to still be miserable, upset, angry, but at least say, okay, I think what we're trying to do is right. And if the process is bad, recognizing that that's very unlikely to get you anywhere. Because you know what? You could have had bad process 15 years ago. And just on the resources alone and the stupidity of your competitors, Tim, you could have still been okay. You know what I mean? You could still be okay. You could play football where you score a lot of goals, but concede 6 to your rivals and still finish top 4 because most of the league is garbage. Those days are gone. And so if you're a dumb club, you're going to get spanked in this Premier League. You're going to wind up like Everton, almost getting relegated out of the league, right? You're going to wind up like Arsenal. Arsenal are one of the big legendary clubs in the league. And for a couple of seasons, we were finishing 8th because we did a lot of dumb shit. Arsenal doesn't finish 8th by luck. We finished 8th because we asked to finish 8th with a lot of really dumb moves. So is that it, Tim? Does it basically boil down to like, this league is going to be unforgiving. If you are dumb and bad and do stupid shit, you're going to get punished. And if you do smart stuff, you may not even succeed all the time because of how tough the league is, but you're going to have the maximum chance for reward. And we just need to start being able to be a little, as you said, sort of macro-focused, meta-focused, to be able to step back from the game-by-game obsession, which is the fun part, let's be honest, and just say, do I think the way we're approaching things looks smart and sensible? Because right now, I absolutely think it is smart and sensible.
I completely agree and have nothing further to add, Your Honour.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's leave it there. I mean, it is an interlull pod after all. We are going to have Brentford rewatch coming up as well as some other fun stuff. I know we're going to cover women's football too. Tim and Clive have a conversation coming up about that, so that's going to be fantastic. Don't want you to think we've left that out. And so that's going to be a part of the content schedule coming up. We'll get a little more heated into things next week as the derby approaches, and what I think is going to be a fun day for Arsenal fans. Hopefully, it's never a fun day, is it? It's always an agonizing day until it isn't. But we will see. So we'll leave it there. Tim's on Twitter @Stoberto. Thank you very much, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter @YankeeGunner. Strongly recommended. A lot of you still haven't done it. I really can't recommend it strongly enough. But we love you. We love you so much. If you want to vote for us in the FCAs, please do. We'll have a tweet out. You can go to ArsenalV Podcast on Twitter and see how to do that if you want to. Hang in there, everyone. Football will eventually be back. 1 game in September and then 1 million in October, just the way we planned it. We love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Tottenham 0.